Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Q&A style webinar on CMS reporting. We wanted to do this as a service to life sciences and pharmaceutical companies because we know going through this quarter one, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of challenges, there's things that we want to know, but sometimes don't find the appropriate person to get answers from. So we established an esteemed group of panelists that are here to answer any questions that you might have, and we will run this as a discussion and Q&A rather than in a presentation, which we typically do for a webinar. So just wanted to quickly introduce Sarah DeFrancisca. She's a partner at Dinsmore and Scholl and has spent a couple of decades working with pharma and device companies around compliance and litigation matters. My name is Mohammed Uwais. I'm a founder and CEO of Core Data, and we've been associated with compliance space over the last 5 years, building out the compliance operations platform for reporting. We have 30 plus customers now. And we also are joined by a good friend of mine, Christopher Gringas. He is founder and CEO at MedComply and was a chief compliance officer in his past life. And their solution right now around HCP engagement also ties into the transparency space. So with that, what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Sarah to walk us through a couple of slides. And just as a context and format for this presentation, today's session is really about how do you assemble data, what are some of the things that you need to capture, and the basics of CMS reporting. We have total 4 sessions in this Q&A, and that go into a little bit more detail around device transparency, tips and tricks of getting data into the CMS portal and errors associated with it. So there may be questions that we may moderate out of this session, but the intent is you bring your questions, and the way we will do this or try to do this is that if you do have a question, there should be a raise hand button on your control panel. If you press that, I will unmute you, and then you can ask your question directly to our panelists, and we can start the discussion that way. So I hope that's clear. If you're unable to speak, feel free to type out the question in the questions box, and I'll take it with the panelist as well. So that's just quick instructions. And Sarah, over to you to walk us through, and then in the meantime, if people have questions, please raise hands or type out in the questions box.
Great, thank you, Mohammed. So just a couple of disclaimers before we get started. The first is that this is a presentation for informational purposes only. It's not intended to provide legal advice or to supplant your legal advice. So be sure if you have questions or particular issues that you contact your attorney, and you want to make sure that attorney-client relationship is there. Additionally, because we have multiple companies on here, we just want to remind you that this presentation will strictly comply with U.S. federal antitrust laws. So please don't discuss anything regarding pricing, discounts, other off-limits topics. And we really want to ensure that participants ask topics and have conversation that's not going to even give the appearance of violating an antitrust law. Okay, so just to set the stage while everyone's getting their questions together, today we're really talking about the interplay between federal reporting to CMS under the Open Payments Program and the state transparency and marketing laws that also exist and also require reporting. So as I'm sure many of you know, that CMS Open Payments rule does preempt state laws. The general rule is that if a statute or regulation of that state requires you to disclose or to report information to CMS as part of the open payment system, that you are preempted or not required to report that same information to the state that is requesting it. So some examples, Open Payments focuses on payments and transfers to physicians and teaching hospitals. So if you report those to CMS in the Open Payments program, you would not need to report them at the state level. On the flip side, if there are payments or transfers of value to, for example, other healthcare professionals or other healthcare entities other than physicians and teaching hospitals, those would need to be reported to the state. Those are not preempted by the Open Payments program. So again, this is going to be all-encompassing. So any of the meals, gifts, entertainment, research, physician ownership or investment interest, kind of those big categories that get reported to Open Payments for physicians and teaching hospitals, they would not need to be reported to the state. Now, keep in mind that the state laws tend to be broader than the Open Payments program. So if there are compliance program requirements or adopting a code of conduct, having policies and procedures in place, all of those types of requirements are not preempted, and you need to comply with those pursuant to those state laws. In addition, any gift bans or gift limits that apply at the state level will also apply to physicians and teaching hospitals. Any payments or transfers of value that would get reported to CMS, that gift ban or gift limit will still apply to physicians in that state or licensed by that state, however the state law might apply. And then kind of the other broad category that we think about is sales rep licensure. Those, again, not preempted. You would need to comply with those at the state level. So this is just an example that we have from Massachusetts. This is a notice that they have posted on their website, and it does acknowledge preemption. It says payments to practitioners that fall outside of the federal mandate must continue to be disclosed to the Massachusetts Department consistent with that state's laws. In addition, it reminds you these other requirements, the annual registration, the fees, the requirement for a self-audit, and its gift ban all apply to Massachusetts prescribers. Now, this is going to be important because, as we know, the scope of the Sunshine Act has been expanded under the Substance Use Disorder Prevention Act, or it's referred to as the SUPPORT Act. So beginning January 1st of this year, applicable manufacturers were required to start tracking payments and transfers of value to an additional group of physicians or healthcare providers. So the statute now includes physician assistants, nurse practitioners, certified registered nurse anesthetists, clinical nurse specialists, and certified nurse midwives. That SUPPORT Act also expanded the nature of payment categories to include debt forgiveness, long-term medical supply or device loans, and payments associated with an acquisition. Now, I mention this because while it's not going to impact your reporting for this March, it is something that is going to impact your reporting for next March, and you want to ensure that your policies, procedures, and systems are all up to date and that you're capturing this information. And it's also important for that preemption discussion. Any of the state laws that apply to physician assistants or nurse practitioners, for example, all of that analysis with regard to preemption is going to have to be revisited for purposes of reporting under Open Payments for next year, the March 2022 report. So we have received a couple of questions that we can use to get started, or Mohammed, I don't know if we have any that you want to start with.
No, I think this is a good one that just came in. I think we had a couple that came in pre-webinar, so we can start with that, which is what are some of the ways that we can ensure compliance with both federal reporting as well as any additional state requirements that may also apply to that same payment or transfer of value?
Yeah, so this is a great question. It's kind of the challenges with ensuring that our compliance program is addressing all of the federal requirements as well as all of the state requirements, and really understanding and appreciating the interplay between the two. I think there's a couple of things that you can do from a compliance perspective. One is going to be really analyzing and thinking through the controls that you have in place. And by controls, I mean your policies and procedures, your business rules, and your system programs that you're using to capture reportable payments. Using all of those, together to ensure that whatever we're reporting at the federal level is true, accurate, and correct, but also taking into consideration those state requirements, especially where you have things like a gift ban or a gift limit, to make sure that there isn't an inappropriate payment that was reported to CMS, but also violate the state requirement. I think the second thing that you need to do is train and train again and train some more. It's really important for your employees, especially the ones who might be in the field in one of these states or regularly interact with physicians from one of these states, say at a conference, to really understand the obligations of the state and how that plays with the federal open payments requirements. It's not sufficient for people to hear this once. Getting your arms around this, really understanding and appreciating it, it requires different levels of training and multiple training. I think the third thing that you can do to ensure compliance or to help you comply with both of these requirements is to monitor. When you're capturing all of this data, you have it available. It's super important to analyze that data, to think through where there might be potential risk areas, to take a look, to really understand and appreciate what you are reporting and helping to identify if there are issues with that state report or the state requirements that you need to appreciate and to deal with.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. There's a couple more. So one that came in is, yeah, I think you had that in the slides. Okay, so that one, what do we do if there is a payment or transfer of value we're reporting to CMS that violates a state gift ban?
Yeah, so this, is a direct follow-on to that previous question. We've done everything that we can. We thought that we were complying, but there is some sort of mishap, something that is reportable to open payments, but is not consistent with, say, a state gift ban or a state limit. What do we do? So number one is you report the payment to CMS accurately, completely, and truthfully, so that you can confidently make that certification that you are doing so. Even if it is violates the state law, you still need to comply with the federal law and all of its requirements and to report that. The second thing is you want to loop in your legal team so that they can take a close look at the state law and the violation and the guidance from the state about reporting these violations. States handle the departments from the various states handle these things differently. Some you can handle, with a letter or some sort of disclosure. Some want you to submit it as part of your annual report. There's different levels of penalties and compliance that is occurring at different states. Some you report it to the state and you won't hear anything further. Most likely other states, you're more willing to have to engage with the state and address the issue through some sort of penalty or likewise. But, loop in your legal team and really work with them to figure out the best strategy for dealing with it at the state level based on that state's guidance. And then the third thing you want to do is fix the problem, right? We want to make sure that we don't have this occur on a regular basis every time we're doing reporting. So thinking through, where was the compliance gap? What can we fix? Do we need a system change? Do we need to clarify a policy or procedure? Do we need to do additional training? Whatever it may be, but thinking through how can we address this? And I think that also plays into the reporting to the state. You want to, tell the state or really emphasize to the state that you have addressed the issue and you appreciate that there was a problem and that you have fixed it. The other thing that I just want to mention here is that, in addition to the state laws that we're concerned about, things like the gift ban or gift limits, the other thing to keep in mind is that there are other requirements, other things that may trigger a problem when you report the information to Open Payments. And some of the things I'm thinking about are like government ethics rules and VA rules. So, the Veterans Administration, they have their own policies on interactions with industry. So, there might be something that you're reporting at the federal level to Open Payments that, although it doesn't violate a state law, it may violate something else. And those also need to be kind of considered and thought through how you'll address those, how you will fix those issues. So I just want to mention that, keep it on your radar. I know here we're focusing on the state laws and the interplay with federal, but there are other requirements as well, like the government ethics rules.
Thank you, Sarah. So for the audience, we have 15 minutes. If you came in for a specific issue, problem, or thought that you wanted to run by, this is your final opportunity to raise your hand or put it into the Q&A box, and we can certainly tackle it. One question that came up from Tita Scott is in CMS does not accept specialist taxonomies. I would like to hear how the industry has been handling expenses towards these unaccepted taxonomies. I have put down acceptable taxonomies throughout the year by what product was detailed. Thanks for the input. So I think this is more related to submission to CMS and the tips and tricks and some of the caveats. We have a separate session scheduled for that, which is a couple of weeks from now. We can certainly go into more depth there, but I wanted to maybe quickly ask Chris or even my colleague Uzair if they had seen this or had any thoughts around the specific question of what to do with specialist taxonomies.
Yeah, so in general, if there's a specialist taxonomy code in their NPI profile, it may not submit to CMS and it'll cause the transaction to fail. So my approach is usually to switch that to a non-general specialist taxonomy code, and then that usually results in success for the file. So you want to pick obviously the most relevant specialty, but you kind of know that based on your provider population. And there shouldn't be too many of them, but that's kind of my recommendation. If you know it's an orthopedic surgeon, just switch it to the orthopedic surgeon taxonomy code as an example. So that's always a good little check just to do kind of a find and replace in the data set.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Chris. Hope that answered that question, Tita. So we'll look for any additional hand raises or questions that might come into the questions box. And meanwhile, just in terms of preparation for 2021, the new nature of payments that have come through, and I guess Sarah and Chris both, how are you recommending customers start to look at those? Because while we're busy with this year's reporting, and of course we want to keep our reports in the current format, current nature of payments, we don't really want to change any of that for 2020. At the same time, starting 1st January, we have to capture these additional fields, we have to capture these additional nature of payments. How do we kind of do both of these at the same time? Or are we recommending that we wait this year's submission out and really get done with that in March, and then really go back into our data and start looking for those, I guess, additional fields around device identifiers or even the additional nature of payment. So Sarah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can certainly address it from the legal side or legal and compliance side, and then Chris, if you want to address it from kind of the logistical or operational side, that'd be great. From the legal compliance side, we have encouraged companies to not wait. I know that compliance teams, legal teams are very busy right now trying to get these reports together. So even to the extent that we could, start doing training, updating policies, et cetera, late last year, we were encouraging that. We just want to make sure that the transition is as seamless as possible and doing everything that we can to capture those payments as of day one so that, teams don't have to go back and try to piece together the data, risk missing something. So, it is, I know that there are resource challenges. Teams are very busy. So to the extent that they can address this sooner rather than later, we have encouraged teams to do so. So Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts, from the operationalizing the system side that you can share as well.
Yeah, definitely don't wait. It's gonna get out. There's gonna be a lot of transactions that you'll have to quickly go back and fix. So you definitely don't want to wait. And I think, Sarah, you mentioned something I think is really important, is the training. Like, this is a really good time to train your sales force, because now they need to be really diligent. They should have been before, but now they need to be really diligent about some of these new covered recipients. You really want to get in front of the team and train them and do some webinars, get some communications out. You kind of want to be working with your regulatory team to figure out the unique identifier that you want to use in your products. Yeah, I think the training is really kind of critical to ensure that you're capturing some of those new covered recipients and even some of those new covered natures of payment as well, because now there could be some transactions that weren't reportable before, or maybe you put them in a different bucket, but now you want to put them in a more accurate bucket based on the nature of payment. So I think it's really training and then doing some auditing as well. Like, I was working with one company that they were looking at their call system and they were matching it up to their Concur expense reporting system. So I thought that was a great use of data, right? Like, you're kind of like, hey, we had 1,000 calls with lunches, but there were only 750 in Concur. There's kind of a mismatch. And why is there a mismatch? And at first it was like, oh, are we missing meals? But then it became, oh, they're inflating their call pattern, which I thought was really fascinating. So I think that's kind of like, it's really that data analysis and kind of looking for those trends and outliers. Definitely resource challenged, but the more you can do that now, you'll be better in the future. So those are kind of my high-level thoughts.
Yeah, just on that thought, Chris, we've seen companies do that, and as I think you came across a problem where they were inflating the calls where there wasn't happening, but we've also seen the other side where there are meals but calls not recorded, right? And while that may not be from an outside perspective a big deal, but internally from a record keeping and sales operations, those things sometimes don't match up. So what I heard you suggest is that at least from a data capture perspective, we have to be diligent and should already have started the process since we're already close to end of January. And whether it's for nature of payments or whether it's those additional fields that are required. And at the same time, I think one of the things that we as vendors have to facilitate is provide mechanisms where customers can host or submit their data for current year into the same format as they've been doing it, as well as provide mechanisms for acceptance of the data in our software for the new records for 2021 submission, which will come in next year. And both of those data could reside in our system simultaneously. And that's what we're doing at Core Data, is providing that mechanism where customers can load 2 years and very different formats in anticipation of next year's changes. I have one additional question that has come up, and I know folks are enjoying this discussion, but we want your participation. So if you have thoughts or questions. I don't want to pick anyone from the audience to come to come participate, but we'd love to hear additional thoughts or comments. If you raise your hand, I'll bring you in. So the question that has come up is, do you anticipate that CMS will relax any deadlines this year due to COVID? Last year, although the deadline for report submission was not extended, there was some relaxation provided to compliance teams if they had missed the deadline, as well as during the dispute period. Any thoughts on that from you, Sarah, on whether CMS will make it a little bit more relaxed this year? I know last year, while our tax return deadlines were were completely removed, but CMS still held on to the submission deadlines.
Right. I do not expect that those deadlines will be changed at all. The direction from CMS last year was we can't change those because this is a statutory deadline. So I would assume, I fully suspect that they will take the same exact position for this year. So I do not see that March 31st deadline changing at all. I think there was some flexibility or discretion with regard to, that review period and the ability to fix data at a later point, to dispute payments throughout the year. So I think that sort of discretion we could likely see again this year. But as far as actually reporting the data by March 31st, no, I do not think that deadline will change for any reason.
Okay, and I guess that seems to make sense with everything that has gone on last year. I guess CMS expectation is going to be most companies are operating remote and doing everything else. So this reporting deadline should stay. So I guess final few minutes, if anyone has any additional thoughts or questions. And Mashood, if we can put on the screen, or at least share the next few dates for this webinar series and the specific topics we'll be covering, so that if anyone wants to join in and participate on those as well, they know what they're looking at. So audience members, webinar attendees, last few minutes, 3 minutes, we have Sarah, Chris, and Uzair and others on my team available. If there's any specific questions around collection of data, aggregation, getting it into the right format, specific questions around nature of payments, or recipient types, please ask now, or I guess forever hold your thoughts. At least until and we'll be happy to tackle it in the next couple of minutes. While I still wait for questions or thoughts from the audience, any final recommendations from you, Chris, first, and then maybe we'll go back to Sarah as well.
Yeah, I think my only comment would be that the government is using the data now to identify anomalies and target companies. So just something to be very mindful of. And you saw with the recent Medtronic settlement that it's kind of like, we're going to fine you, and while we're fining you, we're going to kick you at the same time and add a CMS penalty on top of it. So I think it's kind of like not very nice, but so I think that's kind of the world we are in now, right? The government is going to use this data, target anomalies, go after companies, and then you're going to see a lot of settlements have an extra open payments fine on top of it. It's just a way for them to get more money out of companies, I think. So anyways, I just think it talks about how this is important, and we need to get the data correct to make sure we get all the data. So that's my only comment, that this is important to get right, and so.
I completely agree with Chris. Wholeheartedly agree with that statement. In addition to the government, I think also whistleblowers are paying a lot of attention to this data. We're seeing it play out in government investigations when the CIAs or the subpoenas arrive. this data is being used, it is being called through, and really, looked at, analyzed, and used by government and whistleblowers. So I think getting it right and being very confident in what you're reporting is absolutely critical to companies.
Okay, fantastic. I think thank you for those final comments. The accuracy and completeness of data is more important than it has ever been. In knowing what you're reporting, feeling comfortable, and not losing sleep over what's in your data is paramount. So I think that's a good final recommendation. So while we close this session out, these are the additional times that we'll be conducting sessions, and they'll be more focused on specific areas of CMS reporting. So the next one is on February 11th at 1 p.m. and we'll deep dive into medical device transparency. So hopefully everyone that is from the device side can join us there. And if you have questions, you can send them before, or we'd welcome to have those questions as part of the webinar as well. So once again, thank you everyone for attending. We look forward to seeing you again in a week or a couple of weeks from now. And thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chris, for your participation in all the good stuff that you provide.
Thank you, Mohammed.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.